Someday you too will have a little video play every time you show up somewhere. It's pretty awesome. When you go out at night, on a clear night, and you look up at the sky and the canopy of stars, what do you see? If you had been not an American college student in 2014, but a Babylonian student in, say, the 7th or 8th century before the Common Era, you would have known exactly what you were seeing when you looked up at that sky full of stars. Because starting very early in your life, probably around some fire in your family home, you would have heard the story of creation. And it told you how the stars got there and how you got here. Your mother might have told you, an elder in your community might have told you, and if you were lucky enough to be one of the elect who went to the center of the empire, whether you were a Babylonian child or perhaps a captive from one of the many nations that empire steamrolled over, including the people of Israel, you would have been inducted into the language and literature of the Chaldeans, and you would have known what you were looking at when you looked up at the sky. You would have known the story of Marduk, the first god who could be trusted. There were lots of gods in the Babylonian story, in the epic called the Enuma Elish. But the first one worth trusting is Marduk, because Marduk is the god who actually tackles the fundamental problem the gods have, which is a goddess named Tiamat, who's portrayed as a giant serpent, a giant fish. And no one else can handle Tiamat. She causes chaos wherever she flaps around. But Marduk takes Tiamat on in battle. And at the climax of the Enuma Elish, Marduk slays Tiamat. And then he fillets Tiamat. And the upper fillet, the upper half of Tiamat, becomes the sky that we know. And those stars up in the sky, all those points of light up in the sky, those are actually the congealed drops of Tiamat's blood. That's what you saw when you looked up at the heaven, a slain goddess of chaos up there. And those little shiny things were her congealed blood reflecting back at you. And oh, by the way, the lower half of Tiamat became the land. And guess what the congealed blood of the land became? Us. We were, just like those stars up in the sky, the congealed blood of Tiamat above, we were the emanation of Tiamat's body as it decayed and decomposed. We human beings were the blood of a slain goddess of chaos. And that's what everyone knew when they looked up at the stars. The biblical stories are not written in a neutral environment. They are not written into a void, into an emptiness, into a just philosophically open society. They're written into a setting where everyone knows what you see when you look up at the sky. You see the sign of cosmic conflict and chaos. And everyone knows what you see when you walk around on the ground, when you look at your fellow human beings. You are seeing the byproduct of that cosmic conflict. And into that story comes the story that's now our story. And it is a completely different story. Completely different. There is, in the first words of Genesis, no sense that there is somehow a pitched battle in a polytheistic pantheon between forces of order and forces of disorder. There is only tohu wabohu, just sort of roiling nothingness, waiting as the Spirit of the Creator God hovers over the water. And then all there is is a voice. And it speaks these words, "Let there be." This story was as different as you could possibly imagine from what everyone knew about the world. And the story that the first chapter of Genesis unfolds is this liturgy, this poem, this hymn of the creating of the world by a God who is not pitched in battle, is not locked in a kind of a winner-take-all conflict with chaos. This God simply chooses to make. And initially, this God just creates the most simple structures of order. First, light and dark. Then, sky and earth. Then, sea and land. And on every one of these liturgical days, as God goes about his calm, methodical, joyful work, it's punctuated with the most extraordinary thing you could say in a world where the Enuma Elish was the only story in town. God saw that it was good. Good, good, good. 3 days of good, 3 days of increasing order, new structures, new possibilities in the world, new places for life to happen. And then there are 3 more days. And those days are about abundance. The first 3 days are about order. And then in the next set of 3 days, day 4, the light and the dark get filled. And then the heavens and the earth get filled with creatures. And then the sea and the land get filled. Order gives way to abundance. And at every stage of days 4 through 6, when God has finished his creating for that day, God sees and says, "This is good." The abundance of the world is good. It's intended all along by its maker. And you get to the end of the 6th day, and every day is ended, and God saw that it was good. And so you think, well, I guess God's done for the day on day 6. And then there's what we would now call a bonus round. There's this extra round of creating, and at this moment, the Creator stops using this wonderful phrase, "Let there be, let there be, let there be," that has been used every single day. But in the bonus round on day 6, now it becomes personal. And God says, "Let us make. Let us make human beings in our image." And in the image of God, he created them. Male and female, God created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish in the sea and everything that creeps on the ground. Everything you see now, have dominion over my world." And at the end of this intensely personal act of creation, the Creator God sees that now the world is very good. Good, 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 good. 6 days of good, that would be awesome. But now, in this bonus round, now that the image bearers are in the world, God sees it's now very good. And then God sits down. Not in a lazy boy, I ought to say. I think we often think that day 7 is like God's football watching day. You know, it's like, don't have to work and no. When an ancient God sits down, it's because his initial work is done, and now the God is ready to reign over the world. The Sabbath of God is that now that his image bearers are in it, he can truly begin to watch and to reign as they will now take the good world and make it very good. What a different story. And let me just pause to say, it was radical then, it is radical now. Because what do our neighbors see when they stand up and look at the sky? Many of them see nothing at all. Oh, cosmology, distant, airless, perhaps lifeless, perhaps lifeful planets, but no meaning, no goodness, perhaps just neutral. But many of our neighbors actually have gone back to believing what the Babylonians believed. It's all fundamentally about conflict. And we've taken the findings of science that creatures evolved over a long span of time, and we've imposed on it this conflict narrative as if what Darwin teaches us is that we're all in a battle for survival. And we human beings are now here because we won the last battle, just like Marduk won that battle with Tiamat. It is just as radical today to look up at the stars and see not neutrality, not conflict, but the goodness, the very goodness of a world made by a God who is still reigning and involved in the world that he made. That is just as radical today. Yeah. And all of God's people said, yeah. Why is this world very good with the image bearers in it? To understand this, I think you have to understand what's distinctive about us human beings. And the name that we give to what's distinctive about us human beings, really, is the word culture. What is distinctive about human beings compared to all the other creatures with whom we share much DNA, many physical resemblances, many physical limitations, the one thing that makes us different is that we engage in what we call culture. And I think the best way to define culture is simply what human beings make of the world. Because human beings, unlike every other creature, do not stay where you put them in creation. In fact, human beings have obeyed the Creator's command. Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, start to work with it, subdue it, take it into hand, start to make something with it. And in ways that are categorically different from every creature, in a way I think I'll get to in just a minute, the human beings make something that no other creature makes. Culture is what human beings make of the world, and it's actually what human beings make of the world in two senses. It's the actual stuff we make, but it's also what we make of the world in that it's the sense we make of the world. Because we image bearers are not just like every other creature kind of doing our thing in the material world. We also are seeking meaning in the world at the same time. So every human being has done this. You all did this, and I think this presentation needs a picture of a baby. That's why it needs a picture of a baby, because people go, oh, and every presentation is improved by a picture of a baby. I do not know this baby. I'm not related to this baby. It's the #1 Google image result for the word baby. So it's a generic baby, but he is awfully cute. And what I love about babies like this is we were all once this little guy's size and stage. It's so funny to come into a room like this and think all of us once were this age. And at this age, where it looks like he can just hold his head up, there's very little you can make of the world at this age. There are a few things you can make of the world, some of which have to be cleaned up after you make them of the world. But in terms of your own volition, what can you make of the world in those early days of life that every single one of us was in? What can you actually volitionally control? Use your will to control. You haven't even figured out that your hands can like meet each other and hang out, or so you can grab your foot, you know? So you're like, your hands are just kind of waving around, you're there in the crib, and there's one thing you can control as a baby, pretty much from day one. Your voice. Did you say voice, or did you say something else? Noise, exactly. You can make sound because you have lungs, you have a larynx, you have these resonating cavities, you have your teeth and your tongue. And so the first thing babies start to do is they make sound. Now, babies obviously use this ability to communicate when they have a problem. And the wonderful thing about being a baby is that there are only really 3 problems in most babies' worlds. You're hungry, you're sleepy, or you're wet or need to be changed, right? And if any of those 3 conditions is not satisfied, or is exists, the baby cries, right? Makes a crying sound, and the parents have to figure out which one it is, and this is the great mystery of parenthood. What is the problem this time? Like, what is it? Hungry, sleepy, wet, and when it's 2 or 3 of the 3, that's when you have a real problem. But there are these magic moments in parenting when all 3 needs have been met. And the baby just had a meal, the baby had a good nap, and the baby is dry. And then babies don't cry. Instead, they start to just make sound. So they'll experiment with, the voiced bilabial consonants, right? So you put your lips together, and as you expel the air past your larynx, you let the voice box activate. So you make that buzzing sound in your voice box as you expel it past your lips, and so you go ba 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 ba. And then you can do a unvoiced dental consonant, let's say. That's where you put the tongue right behind the teeth, but you hold off on activating the larynx as you expel the air, so you got a T sound, ta, 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 ta. So the baby will just do, unvoiced dental consonants for weeks, right? It's pretty awesome. And then they do all sorts of things that aren't even consonants or phonemes in our world. They'll make this wonderful baby sound. It's completely useless, waste of time, but the baby loves to do it anyway. One day, the baby is experimenting and decides to try the voiced dental consonants. This is where the tongue's behind the teeth, just like the T sound, but this time, as the air goes by, the larynx is activated. And so the baby, lying in her crib, his crib, says, da, 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 da. And at this moment, a remarkable thing happens in the baby's life. A very important person in this baby's world rushes into the room, appears over the crib, picks up the baby, and says, he's saying, Dada, Daddy, Dad. Which the baby was not doing. This is just voice dental consonant day, da, 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 da. But it dawns on the baby, I think I just did something important. Because my dad is parading me around. And for some reason, kids usually say dada first. I don't know why this is, but that's what they say. And the baby realizes, I think I just made sense. I think I just made sense. I was just making sound, making stuff, but I think I just made meaning. And at that moment, the baby is beginning the journey of culture, making sound, making something that makes sense, naming the world, giving the world a name, naming this most important feature of the world. First, the parents, then actually my son, when he said dada, it meant the doggy initially. So we got rid of the doggy, and then it meant daddy. And because my son's in the audience, I completely made that up, but it's just so funny to say it that I just think it's fun to make it up. No, the doggy stayed around, but eventually dada meant daddy, like it should. And at this moment, the baby begins what all of us have now done, the acquisition of language. In many ways, the most impressive thing any human being does. By age 3, you've figured it all out. You've realized I can make sound that makes sense. I can make stuff that actually addresses the meaning of the world, and this is what the image bearers do that no other creature does. They are hardwired, babies are hardwired to look for names for things, to seek the meaning of things. Because every creature makes something of the world in the material sense, but only the image bearers are going to start naming the world. And so, in the creation account, of course, we have Adam naming the animals. One of the first things that primordial humanity does in the creation account, it's very interesting. The Creator himself steps back. The Creator, I suppose, could say to Adam, Adam, this is a camel. This is a cockroach. This is a cockatiel, whatever. God could just give Adam all the names. But instead it says this, it says, the Lord God brought the animals to Adam to see what he would call them. And whatever the earthling, because that's what Adam means, whatever the earthling called every living creature, that was its name. The Creator God, who has made this earthling in his image, wants the earthling also to create. The Creator God wants to hear what it's called. And so when Adam says camel, God says, all right, that's a camel. Awesome, thank you. I was wondering what it was called. Because this is God's image bearer. This creature, unlike all the other creatures, can regard the other creatures and give them names. In fact, in the earliest strata of archaeological records of humanity, we find not just the things you would expect people would need to survive, like fire pits and evidence of domesticated animals and rudimentary tools. At that same initial stage of human history, we find paintings like this. They're art in caves that have been amazingly preserved for thousands of years now. This one from the cave of Lascaux in France. And I used to think that cave art was kind of graffiti, basically, or like just sketching, like Grog and his family are waiting out the thunderstorm, and Grog's like, well, I guess I'll doodle, right? And then I found out that this bison is on a cave ceiling 15 feet off the floor of the cave. And it's 6 feet across. Which means that this is not a doodle. And this is as early as any other evidence we have of Homo sapiens. As far back as we go, someone is painting. Someone is making art. Someone says, those bison, they are so beautiful. They're so extraordinary. We need to capture this. We need to reflect on this. We need to make something of this. And there's a sense in the reverence of this painting, the beauty of it, the completeness of it, the artistic sophistication of it. Picasso went to the caves in Spain and he said, they knew everything. We've learned nothing. They already knew how to paint. They took it that seriously, as if to say, we are in the midst of this beautiful, mysterious, terrible, wonderful world that is very good. And it calls forth a response from us of wonder and reverence and meaning making. Not just babies, not just artists. Every human being is engaged in this quest to make something of the world. And one of the human beings that I happen to know is my wife. Her name is Catherine. I really am related to this person. She's here this weekend. She's doing a breakout tomorrow, so that's an unfair plug for my wife's breakout session. And Catherine's a physicist. And I have this kind of fuzzy picture of her. Not the greatest picture when you blow it up, but it's useful because it shows the apparatus that Catherine uses, which is very frightening to me. It involves lasers, and in previous parts of her research, hissing cauldrons of things, and vacuums, and just stuff that makes me want to stand very quietly in the middle of the room and not touch anything. But my wife aligns all these lenses and mirrors and shoots lasers at very specific frequencies, bombards particular materials, and discovers the beauty at the quantum level of reality. And the amazing thing is, when you make all this stuff, all this experimental stuff, the world actually makes sense. It makes mathematical sense. So the other thing you do when you're a physicist, you build equipment, you make stuff, but you also do math. Woo! The very goodness of the world really comes down to math, actually. I know that's hard to believe. And Catherine here is drawing equations. I have no idea what they are. I think I'm a writer. Don't ask me. Ask her tomorrow. But the amazing thing about the world is that when human beings do their thing and they investigate it, they play with it, they experiment with it, they discover that the more stuff we make in a way, the more sense the world makes. The world is orderly. It still bears the original good, very goodness with which it was made. And we have the unique privilege of all creatures of making something of that world. As human beings fill the earth, as they name the animals, as they cultivate the world goes from being good to being very good. One very quick picture of this that is just especially striking. Another scientist, and if I click, he might come up. Here he is. Sir Julian Prance. He spent his whole career studying the botany, specifically the plant life of the rainforest in South America. He's one of the world's foremost experts on the biodiversity of the rainforest. And Sir Julian Prance, who happens to be a follower of Christ, has come to an extraordinary conviction about these incredibly diverse ecological environments that we think of as the most abundant places on earth. He's come to the conclusion that a significant factor in the biodiversity of the rainforest is human presence in the rainforest. Not modern human presence. Not the kind of human presence that is burning down hectares every day for agriculture and for immediate exploitation. But primordial human presence. The tribes that have lived in the Amazon rainforest for time out of mind, as they have patiently, carefully interacted with the world around them, they have created more niches for biodiversity. The world that is already already good, when human beings interact with it in the way they were meant to, becomes even more good, becomes very good. So the world, you could think about it this way. The world is first natural. The created world is natural. But as the Creator's image bearers work in it, the world becomes cultured, cultivated. And we go from nature to culture. And the path from nature to culture, in many ways, is from good to very good. So, the world has grain in it, various kinds of grains. Human beings harvest those grains, crush them, mix them with the right amount of salt and water and yeast, put it in an oven or someplace hot, let it rise, let it bake, and out comes bread. Now, I would say grain is good. I would also say bread is very good. The world has, you can go on and on with these kind of examples. The world has chickens in it which lay eggs, or eggs which produce chickens, and I don't know the answer to that. But human beings take eggs from chickens that have been responsibly raised, each of which has a name, has been free-range its whole life, and we ask the chicken's permission. Chicken, may I borrow your egg? And the chicken says, you may. We take eggs, break them, mix them with some other ingredients, put them in a pan at the right temperature, and out comes an omelet. Now, I would say eggs are good, but I would say omelets are very good. Omelets are the fullness of eggs. They're some eggs are meant to become chickens, but some eggs become omelets, and omelets are very good. The world has grapes in it. Human beings cultivate the grapes, hang them up on trellises so they get just the right amount of exposure to light and sun and air and wind. And then at the right time, the human beings harvest the grapes, and they crush the grapes so that the yeast that's been growing on the outside of the grape skin now mixes with the juice inside. And then they let it sit in the proper environment for the right amount of time. And out they draw, if they're Baptists, grape juice. And grape juice is actually quite impressive. It's quite a technological achievement. But if you're Anglican, which is what I am, we draw off wine. You're college students. You're not supposed to cheer about this yet. Wait till you're 21. But I can tell you, the grape is good. The grape is good. But wine is very good. Wine is very good. And so is grape juice. This is what we're here for. We're here for the flourishing of the world. One more example. The world is full of sound. But only human beings make music. You strike a string, a taut, tense string. And if the volume's turned up, you hear a sound. You strike that low string and it starts to resonate with whatever frequency it's stretched to. But in fact, Physics tells us a struck string or a plucked string does not just resonate with a single frequency. It's actually resonating with multiple frequencies at once. We call it the overtone series. And in addition to that lowest note that you can hear, the truth is that resonating in that single string is also the octave above that fundamental tone, this note. And the reason that octaves, these spaced intervals, sound so nice is that the overtones all fit. They rhyme, they harmonize. But one of the other overtones is actually not just an octave, not just the same note, a C above the C, but is this note. It's a fifth. It's a different note, and it's actually ringing in that fundamental struck string. And then ringing above that, a few overtones later, is the third of the chord, the sixth above the fifth. This is also ringing. And this chord is what we call a major chord. And the reason that major chords sound so nice, doesn't that sound nice? It sounds so Christian, actually. It's just so... is that actually they fit beautifully within the harmonic sequence. So this is a very comfortable sounding chord. And then we can go just a little bit away. And we can play notes that the overtones wrestle against each other a little bit. And that seems to lead to another chord, which because of physics, which is only just math, really, leads back to this. This is just math. It's also the first notes of Bach's Prelude Number 1 in C. The simplest piece you can play almost on the piano. And what Bach does in these first few measures, he just goes through the simplest chords you can make out of that overtone series. 1, 4, 5, 5, 7, 1. And if you know those chords, you can be a worship leader. Sorry, that is so not fair. Actually, you need one more chord. After you've got, C, F, and by the way, if I could have a little keyboard in the monitor, that will just help me play this a little better. Then you need the relative minor. It's A minor in the key of C, and that's where he goes next. But then Bach says, actually, I'd like to show you some other chords. I'd like to go to the fifth and start to make that the home for a moment and introduce this little bit of dissonance. And what I'm going to do, Bach says, is I'm going to start setting up little moments of tension and resolution. Tension, now a diminished chord. This is where the overtones are a little tighter, a little more difficult. Another diminished chord, tension, resolution. And what Bach, in a way, is saying with the simplest of all pieces is look how much possibility there is, even in just the 12 notes that we take out of the major chord, out of the Western chord sequence. And then he can even go quite far away from the home chord. He can take you into places that you would have never imagined were possible, even places of tremendous dissonance. Listen to this. It's actually quite an ugly chord. If I just played it all by itself without all that stuff before, but in the context of the piece, even that very dissonant chord is quite beautiful because it's part of a larger story. It's part of the fullness of what music can be. Music is not just harmony. It's also dissonance. It's also tension. Here's a tense chord. But it leads back to this kind of home chord. And now what Bach is going to do, he's saying, well, now I think we'll go back to that very home chord, but not without one last surprise. It's right here. That's the seventh. A little bit of tension. But now we're at the 4 and the 5. And now we're home. Sound is good. Music very good. And when God sees that his image bearers are in the world, on that sixth day, he says, now it can start. Now I can begin to reign. Because the Creator never intended to reign by himself. He wants a world full of image bearers, because a world full of image bearers doing what they're meant to do will be a world full of music. It will be a world full of physics, a world full of omelets, a world full to the fullness of very goodness. And I can't resist giving you a little preview of where we'll get to on Sunday. The whole story is not just good to very good. That's the beginning of the story. But the whole story is good to very good to glory. And glory is the fullness of true being. It's the point at which everything that was possible has been unfolded and has been beheld, has been named and known. And the promise towards which this story points is a day when the earth will be filled of the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. It doesn't say just the glory of the Lord. Of course, it will be filled with the glory of the Lord. It will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. Because we will have heard it. We will have sung it. We will have named it. We will have painted it. We will have beheld it. And we will speak back to the Creator what the creation longs to say. Everything you have made, O God, is very good. Your works are good, for you have made them all. Your goodness and graciousness is beyond all telling, but we will attempt to tell and sing and know. And then, indeed, the story will come to its end. Amen? Amen.